All right, let's just officially start. So welcome to the December live Q&A call for the Technical Experts Leadership Accelerator. As we have done before, we're going to do a little bit of a look back at what we put into the accelerator over the last month. I'm going to go over questions, and then I'm going to tell you what's coming up. Reminder for anybody who joined us, you can ask questions by putting them in the chat, in which case my my co-host, who I'm about to introduce, will take care of those, or you can feel free to raise your hand and I can see you across the top of my screen and I will call on you and you can ask you can turn your mic on and ask questions that way. So that is how we will run the Q&A. So before we get started, let's just introduce my co-host. Hi, Mom. This is my co-host, Cynthia Adams, also known as my mom, if you haven't figured that out by now. So how are things going for you, Mom?
Oh, just fine. Just fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Let's see. So what have you been working on in the accelerator? You really did a lot of work helping me with the gratitude journal. So that took us quite a bit of time to put together, but I think it turned out pretty good. What do you think?
It did. It turned out beautifully. I actually printed mine out, so I really like the way it turned out. And I plan on working on it over vacation time. So I look forward to that. Yeah.
Great. And I guess now you're really helping me with some of the new trainings that we're going to be putting into the accelerator. So I'll tell everybody more about what's coming up next. But for those of you who don't know, my mom does all of the proofreading, and also is now starting, now that she's a Canva expert. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. She also helps make the graphics images that we use for the membership. So it's a huge help to me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to what we have coming up for 2023. So, okay, I will take you off camera because I know you prefer that, and we'll get started with with everything that's going on. Okay. So we do not have any new members this month. Unfortunately, no new members, but that's okay. We're just getting started. I know December's can be a quiet month, and I'm really looking forward to kicking off 2023. We've got some partnerships that we're actually working on, so we'll tell you more about that. But I'm going to be piloting private cohorts, so bringing on groups at a time, and they'll get all the access to the membership. Hopefully, they'll still join our live Q&As together, but they'll also have kind of their own private community where they can discuss things that are very specific to their company. Let's see, what did we put in the membership this month? So we had some different topics of the week. So if you haven't gone into the community forum and looked at the different topics, we talked about what's keeping us busy as we end the year. We talked about our favorite podcast. We talked about our most important personal success ritual. And I'll be talking more about that at the end as well, because really developing some sort of routine that you do that really helps you set yourself up for success from a health and nutrition and energy wise is really important. So that's going to be something that we're going to be designing together as we look into some of the things we're going to be doing in the membership next year. And then the main thing that we put in the membership was the gratitude journal. So I really hope that you all take the time to download it. I tried to design it so there's something for everyone. So there's some very specific prompts that, you know, can get your brain going, your juices flowing about things that you might realize you have in abundance and maybe hadn't thought of before. And then there's just sort of okay, this month, you know, kind of just reflect on this month and go through and think about some of the things that have happened to you. So hopefully that will help you really develop a habit of gratitude, because a lot of research has shown that it is really a way to boost your mood. It can help with depression, really just helps with optimism and a positive outlook. And that's really important for leadership, is to really, you know, bring your whole self, maintain that optimism in the face of challenges, because the people that you are leading will see that, and that will be something that they too will be able to adopt if you're bringing a sense of gratitude to them. Okay, so that is what we had this month. So now I am just going to head to some questions that I got from folks through our our question and answer survey. So the first question is, I am headed to my first in-person conference in a few weeks. What advice do you have for maximizing my network activities? And this is a great question because I think so many people only think about while they're at the event, but I want all of you to reflect on and put a plan together for before the event, during the event, and after the event. So let's talk about each of these 3 phases. So before you go, I really want you to take a look at the attendees list, if there is one. Take a look at, of course, if we're talking technical conferences, which I think most of you are, then you obviously look to see if there's any of the symposia you want to attend, any particular talks that you want to make sure that you attend, check for those. Don't forget to check in with the exhibitors. So the floor, there's usually all these different vendors, exhibitors, they're giving away the freebies. Take a look there as well. And just start to map out who you want to meet if you can, topics you want to learn more about, and vendors that you might want to visit. And I will say, for those of you that are the entrepreneurs in this group, especially the exhibitors, because you're going to pick up a lot of industry information if you start talking to exhibitors. So review what is actually going to be at this conference in terms of people, lectures, and exhibitors. And then really think about, what is my goal for attending this conference? Maybe there's specific technical people that you want to meet, or you want to hear their talk just to kind of get up to breast on the state of the art in the technology. Maybe you want to get more industry information, which you can probably get from some of the technical folks, but also from the exhibitors. And maybe you want to socialize. Maybe you want to catch up with friends that you haven't had an opportunity to see in a while because we've been, having all of these restrictions due to COVID. So the first part is to do some homework and map out your plan. So during the event, is where you really try your best to hit all of the different people and the different topics that you were planning. It's important to keep track of who you're meeting and their contact information. So typically what I would do is I would just carry, the symposium book around with me, and then I'd highlight the things I actually was able to attend, and then, just make notes in the actual book. That was my, preference. Honestly, I haven't been to a technical conference in probably 10 years, so I don't even know. It's probably like a QR code and all digital. So maybe they make it easy for you to click on the things that you go to, and it might keep a file for you. I vaguely remember going to something like that. If not, you can always copy and paste those titles and things to a file. So, but it is important to actually keep track of the people that you met and the different topics that you went to. Now, the other thing that happens during the event is, lots of social opportunities. And so I will be very honest and say I try to avoid most of that stuff personally. It's very anxiety inducing for me to do the small talk and to do like this unstructured networking. If it's something that you enjoy, then the way to be really effective at that is to just think of 1 or 2 sentences that you could use to introduce yourself and have those, prepared. That way you can just quickly rattle them off if you meet someone, hi, my name is this, and, this is my role, or this is the area, the technical or business area I'm really interested in. And then maybe have a question that you could ask them, and it can be a general question like, oh, what brought you to this conference? What are you hoping to get out of this conference? What has been the most interesting thing that you have learned so far at this conference? That's a safe icebreaker. You can also be more specific if you think back to your planning phase. If you have very specific questions that you know you want to ask certain people, then feel free to ask those questions. But also make sure, to the exchange business cards if you can, and make sure that you've captured, their name in whatever kind of tracking that you're doing. And as I said, I personally tend to skip most of that stuff. It's just not something I'm comfortable with. And so I want those of you who might be in the same boat as me that are like, I hate this networking stuff, know that you can still have a very effective conference experience, even if you skip all the happy hours, because I have always skipped all the happy hours. I still skip all the happy hours now. And I still, my network, is still very broad and deep. So that's during the event. And then the third piece, which is the piece that people really sub-optimize, is the follow-up that you're going to do. So now that you've met all of these people, or even sat through, even if you didn't get a chance to meet the speaker, you sat through all of these lectures in various places, now you should be following up with them. So at a bare minimum, I think you should be connecting with them on LinkedIn. It's very simple to just you can type out a very generic kind of, hey, I was at the such and such conference and I enjoyed talking with you, if you actually had a chance to talk with them. You could say, hey, I went to the conference and I really enjoyed your talk, if you sat through their talk. Hey, I enjoyed the conference. I didn't get a chance to catch up with you, but I'd love to catch up with you some other time. So those are all just very sort of generic things that you can do. And I'd recommend you really follow up with them, within a week. And this is such a powerful thing to do because everybody's mindset during the event, it's chaotic, it's frenetic, and people are in a specific mode. It's like, drinking water from a fire hose. There's just so much information that they're getting and so many people that they're meeting, but very few people actually follow up on these things. And so if you hit them up with a LinkedIn connection request, you're going to really stand out, especially if you can make that connection request as specific as possible. Like, I really enjoyed your talk on this topic, something, something, something. So at a bare minimum, follow up with those people on LinkedIn. Now, I personally, I tend to follow up with people even if I haven't met them. So I haven't been to one of these super huge conferences in a long time, but I typically tend to go to these kind of networking events or conferences or workshops that might have like 200 people. It is not uncommon for me to send out LinkedIn connection requests to everybody that was on that list. If I can get a handle on that list, I might send out connection requests to everyone. But you've got to decide for yourself what's the right number. But at a bare minimum, the people that you met and the people whose talks you sat in, make sure that you send out LinkedIn connection requests to them. Now, one thing, if you're not a LinkedIn user, one thing you need to be aware of is that there is a limit to the number of requests you can send in a week. And I remember the first time I got the little LinkedIn will pop up and say, okay, you've exceeded your, you've reached your connection request limit. And I remember thinking, oh no, like, am I going to get kicked off LinkedIn or did I do something wrong? No, you didn't do anything wrong. They're just trying to keep people from spamming. They want to make sure you're not a robot. So they have a limit per week. And that just means, hit your limit. And then actually, as people start to accept your connection requests, you'll be able to start reconnecting out to more people. So just be aware that there is a weekly limit. I think it's about 20 the last time I checked. So, it could take a couple of weeks for you to get through if you end up having this really long list. It could take a little while to get through it. But just know that you did not, you're not getting your hand slapped if you hit this connection request. So just keep going. Don't worry about it. So send out those connection requests. And then the other is follow up via email, specifically people that you met and you talked with. And if you had any kind of note that you thought of for follow-up, then you can by all means send them an email as a follow-up. And I would put something in the subject line like such and such conference follow-up, or something like that. And then, just a brief note, reintroducing yourself, saying how much you enjoyed talking with them. And then if you have a reason to follow up with them, or a request to follow up with them, via call or something like that to get more information or exchange, you can certainly do that. So the phase 3 is the follow-up. LinkedIn connection requests and email are the things that you absolutely need to be doing. Now, for those of you who are the entrepreneurs, you may find that you have lots. You may end up with a really, really long list of connections that you've made. So you might want to be thinking about, you might need something a little bit more than like a LinkedIn type of platform. So you might be thinking about a customer relationship manager, an actual piece of software that, you can scan business cards with your phone and it'll go into this software. And then you can actually keep track of when you send them a note, when you follow up, things like that. So you might want to think about that if you don't already have it. I typically recommend to my clients using the free version of HubSpot first, just to see if you like that, if you need that kind of thing. And also if you like it, and if you have somebody on your team who's going to use it, just using kind of a free light version, just collecting names and email addresses, and then, having that cadence of suggesting that you follow up. You can put a date when you want to follow back up with them, and it'll send you a reminder. And, it can get very sophisticated and very efficient as your sales pipeline and marketing pipeline grows. So something to consider if you come back from a conference with, a stack of business cards like this, you may need to be thinking about a system. Now, having said that, I still strongly encourage everybody to use LinkedIn as well, because, not only are you making this, making these connections, but if they happen to post things with any kind of frequency, you can be following that, and you can use, their content as a way to continue to build rapport. You can like and comment on their posts. You can, if they got a promotion or a new role, you can send them a congratulations. And all of those little small touch points helps you stay top of mind for when you might need to reach out to them and make, maybe a bigger ask. So do not forget about LinkedIn. And and the opposite is true as well. If you start posting about what you're working on, then the people in your network will see that. So it is a powerful connecting and networking tool. So that was a long answer, but so there's 3 phases to really maximizing your networking: planning, who you want to meet, what information you want to gather, what are your goals and objectives. The second is actually implementing that plan during the conference and keeping track of who you're meeting. And you don't have to go to cocktail parties if you don't want to. And then the third and the really important piece is the follow-up, making sure that you reconnect with the people once, the chaos of the conference has faded. You now start to make a personal connection with people, using their conference as a starting point, but now you can start to make a personal connection with everyone. So that is the way to really maximize your the effectiveness of attending major conferences, even small networking activities. So you go to a dinner, it's really the same kind of thing. Making sure that you're doing those 3 phases. It's on a smaller scale. You're going to a 20,000 person conference, same thing. Those 3 phases: planning, doing some homework about who's there, executing your plan, keeping track of what you've done, and following up. Okay, so the next question is, I have a person on my team who agrees to do things one way, but then decides to do it differently. his behavior is impacting our timeline and quality to customers, but I don't want to make him mad because I don't want him to leave. What should I do? So, yeah, so this is a tough one. I think a lot of folks, particularly newer managers, really struggle with this tension of things aren't quite the way I want them to be done, but I don't want to be so harsh that this person leaves. And so the first thing that you need to do is you need to really identify the impact that this behavior is having on you. And so in this question, you know, they said his behavior is impacting our timeline and our quality to customers. So when you really think of that, that is quite a significant impact and probably something that you need to address, right? Because you as the leader are accountable for, you know, meeting the deadlines with the customers and giving them the quality that they need. So you need to understand that if this person is hindering your ability to do that, then you have an issue that you really need to address. So the first thing I would say is, okay, let's not wait to address this. Now, having said that, just because you are feeling like this person is annoying me, this person is impacting, you are feeling this sense of urgency and this probably sense of this is a huge problem. It doesn't mean that you have to communicate to them in a sort of big and aggressive way, even if that's kind of what you're feeling on the inside. And so that is, I think, part of the reason why a lot of people have fear about addressing it is because their emotions are really high, like this is a huge problem. And they feel like, okay, if I immediately just convey my high level of emotions to this person, it's going to erupt into this huge conflict, and then they're going to leave. And so what I want you to know is that you have an opportunity to think about, how can I communicate this in a way that makes my point clear, but doesn't, just immediately redirect all of that energy, because, this person, it might be hitting them cold. They may have no idea that you see this as a problem. They may not be doing it on purpose, may not even be realizing that, this is how you view things, or may have a very good reason for doing it. And so I think the approach that you want to take is more of, saying you're observing this behavior and you'd like to discuss it, and this is the impact that you're seeing it having. How can you come to some sort of mutually agreeable solution, right? Which is different than going to the person and saying, you're horrible. You say one thing, you do another thing, and it's causing all these problems, and I need you to fix it now. You can say that. It's going to it's a little bit of an escalation. And particularly depending on, how that person's viewing things, it could cause a problem. But if you say, hey, I just wanted to talk with you a little bit about, in this last, and you'd be very specific, in this last situation, we agreed that you were going to talk to, I'm making this up, but we agreed you were going to talk to 2 customers and then do an analysis, and then get back to the customers within 2 weeks. And instead, you only talked to 1 customer, did the analysis a different way, and it took you 3 weeks. So can we talk a little bit about why the plan changed? And is there some, can we talk a little bit about why the plan changed so that we can help each other, because the end result was that we were a little bit late to the customer, and I want to make sure, that we can avoid that in the future. So I hope you can kind of see the difference in the tone and delivery of those 2 different situations, and could feel comfortable saying, okay, rather than, hit this person and say they're doing everything wrong. Why don't I go in trying to understand why they did what they did and see if we can come to a mutual resolution. So that is I think the first way I would approach it. Now, if this is something that's been going on over and over and over again, you may be ready to escalate it. In which case I would say, why are you so worried about somebody quitting when they are underperforming on quality and time to the customer? Like, let's think a little bit more about you and what can you do to try to make sure, because your ultimate responsibility is to the time and quality for the customer. What do you need to be doing to make sure that happens? And is this person the right person to kind of have in that role if they consistently underperform in that area? So that's more like level 2 or 3. But the first level, if this is really your initial discussion, is to really think, okay, yes, I'm worked up because this person is causing problems for me, but let me take my first approach as one of curiosity and inquiry. Let them know that you've observed specific behaviors and those behaviors had specific outcomes, and that you would like to learn from this person about why they did what they did, because we really need a different set of outcomes. And, my experience has been that people are usually pretty receptive to that. You are likely going to find, oh, I didn't realize, or, oh, yeah, I got this new information and sorry, I didn't check in with you along the way. Or, oh, I didn't realize that timeline was a firm timeline. I thought it was flexible. I think you're more likely to get things that you can fix than you are to get somebody to say, why are you questioning me? I'm not a bad person. If you think I'm a bad person, I might as well quit. Like that's much less likely to happen if you kind of take the approach that I mentioned. Then, as I said, you try that 1 or 2 times and you're still not getting good outcomes, then you need to escalate it. And, maybe that's a question you re-ask me that question in a couple of weeks or months and say, Angelique, I tried this first level and it's still not working. And now we're really talking about managing people's performance on a more rigorous basis. We are giving them clear communications about them underperforming, and you might put a development plan in place, something like that, if you can't resolve it this first way. But I guess the other thing, again, want to reinforce that you need to have these conversations with folks, right? You cannot continue to accept this time and quality issue from your customers, because then that's impacting your performance. Not performance review, but what you're accountable for. So it is something that you do need to address. It does not have to escalate to a conflict ever, but it certainly doesn't have to start as a conflict. Okay, I need a quick drink. I apologize if you all are hearing any sound effects. So we've got a big rig with a drill drilling in our backyard because we think we might have a sinkhole. So my husband caught it early, and he's got somebody out there before it opens up and our house slides in it. So anyway, they're doing that right now, and hopefully it'll end up being nothing. But if you hear some interesting background noise, it is that. Okay, the next question is, sometimes I find myself procrastinating on certain tasks, like making my leadership presentations. Do you have any tips? Yes, interestingly enough, I had to give 2 keynotes this last month, and both times I was procrastinating getting these presentations done, which is unlike me because I talk a lot. I do a lot of keynotes, and I realized, I was changing the presentations a little bit. I've kind of given the same 3 keynotes for the past year and a half, and I was trying something new. But so I have a 2-pronged approach to answering this. So one is a little bit of a strategic answer, and the second is just a very practical tool that I use to just, light a fire under my butt and get myself going. So So I'll start with that one because maybe that's really all you wanted to know. So I use the Pomodoro technique. I've talked about it maybe a few times before, but the Pomodoro technique is simply a time management process that suggests that you just set a timer. So pick one task that you want to work on. So maybe it's your leadership presentation. Maybe it's just outlining your leadership presentation, or maybe it is getting all the data, all the numbers that you need for your leadership presentation. So it can be the whole thing, but it can also be, a very narrow task. So you define your narrow task, you set a timer for 25 minutes. In my case, I have some music that I like that is for concentrating. And you just say, I'm just going to focus on this for 25 minutes. You turn off the phone, you make sure you're comfortable, and you just go. And you do that for 25 minutes, then you take a 5-minute break, then you do another round of 25 minutes, you take another 5-minute break, and then I forget, it's maybe 3 or 4 rounds, then you take a longer break. So that is the technique I use when I find myself like, oh man, I just cannot get myself going on, X, Y, and Z. Typically, just saying, all right, I only have to focus on this for 25 minutes is usually enough for me to then get over whatever inertia I have that's keeping me from doing it, from getting started. I can get over that inertia, and then I can, at least make progress, if not even finish, 2 or 3 rounds. And oftentimes I'm finished with the thing that's taken me a week, a week to get going. So that is the tactical tool, Pomodoro technique. Get comfortable, clear the clutter so that you really can only focus on one, the one thing that you've just decided to focus on, set the 25-minute timer and go. Now, the strategic piece to this question, or sorry, to my answer, is about trying to understand why you're procrastinating on specific things. So if you're just generally a procrastinator and like you procrastinate on everything and that's just how you roll, that's that's something we will address eventually, because it's going to bite you in the butt eventually. We'll address that. But if it's always kind of the same sorts of things, and in this case you mentioned leadership presentation, if it's always the leadership presentations, then it's worth reflecting a little bit on, why am I procrastinating on the leadership presentations all the time? In my case, it is almost always some sort of fear that I have about it. And so in my case, I had one of the keynotes that I did, and it took me quite a while to get going on it. And I did just some journaling. So I think for me, the best way to do this kind of reflection is just to sort of journal on it. And I just write at the top of my paper, why am I procrastinating on this keynote? And then I just start, just allow my mind to wander, just write, 3 or 4 pages and just see what comes out. And what came out for me was, this is going to be the first time I'm speaking. Well, first of all, this is new material. So this is going to be the first time that I am doing this new material. And the audience was an audience that I really cared about, because there were going to be some high level people in this audience who had the potential to kind of see me and think, oh, well, you might want to hire her for something big and important. So I was realizing that it was like the new material and the audience just had me really a little bit afraid of getting started, because it wasn't making the presentation. We all know how to use, well, actually this presentation didn't have any slides. So I wrote my 20-minute speech. I give 20 to 30-minute speeches with no note cards and no slides all the time. So it wasn't like it wasn't the format or anything like that. I am not afraid of public speaking anymore. I was, but that was, that's 20 years ago. So that part was not it. It was, for me, as I was journaling, it was, oh, I'm afraid that this material, no one's going to like my new material. And I'm afraid that, I'm going to, this audience that I'm hoping will eventually want to hire me for other things is going to be, is going to be unhappy with my talk. And then the third piece was, it was actually, the invitation was from somebody who's already hiring me for something else. And so I was like, oh, I don't want to disappoint this guy. Like, he brought me in to do like this one-on-one work, and now he wants me to talk in front of 300 people. And like, I don't want him to think, okay, I'll never do that again. So there was just a lot of fear there. So what did I do with that? Like, just knowing that I had those fears is not enough to overcome them, right? So what I did in my case is I scheduled some time actually with my husband, because he knows this audience, because it's some of the people that he has worked with in the past. And I said, how about if I just walk through this with you? So I'm going to set a date like 3 days before the talk, and I'm going to walk through this with you, and you tell me how it sounds, and you give me some advice. So I got some outside feedback. And then the other thing, I'm trying to think, the other thing I did, was really do a lot of practicing, because I figured if they don't necessarily love the material, then I really need to make sure my delivery is on point, right? Because it's really bad to have somebody talking and then, stammering and being nervous and everything. That can be a distraction. So I'll make sure that the content is pretty good from somebody who I think is like the audience. In this case, it happened to be fortunately, it was my husband. And then the second was to really, really practice my delivery so that I didn't, stay in my head. And I know for me that the types of presentations that I give, I try to be a little funny, I try to be energetic. And so people like that. And I wanted to make sure, okay, I need to be able to get into that space for this presentation. So let's make sure I practice it, many, many times, even though for the keynotes that I've given before, I don't practice those anymore at all, ever. Just sort of like, oh yeah. So that's how I tried to resolve the fears that I had uncovered as I really started to reflect on, well, why am I procrastinating on this specific thing? That's kind of unusual for me. Normally, I'm pretty good about other things. So I would invite you to do the same thing, is to really think about, okay, why am I procrastinating on this leadership presentation? And is it like, some things that I have bothered me with leadership presentations, or that bother my clients a lot? Do I know my numbers? What if they ask me questions that I can't answer? Okay, can you find somebody that you trust who may have some expertise in this area, and practice Q&A with them? Ask them the types of questions that typically get asked in these leadership meetings, and come up with your answers in advance. I mean, that's something we do, in the coaching that we do for entrepreneurs. We spend so much time, we do tons of pitch practice where we help them craft their presentation and they practice their delivery. And then we spend tons of time helping them with their Q&A, because it's just as important in those sorts of meetings. I don't know if there could be some other things that can come up. I've certainly worked in organizations where it's not uncommon for the leadership to, they hear one thing they don't like, and they explode into a fit of rage because they have such poor emotional intelligence that they can't manage themselves. And so, why don't you think a little bit about that? Okay, if this person gets really upset because of something in my presentation, what could I do in the moment to keep my composure? Just, say, that's a really good point. I'll get back to you. Thank you for your feedback. Take a deep breath. Thank you for your feedback. So, you can just, if you can tease out what you're worried about, then you can put some sort of mitigation plan in place to help you overcome it. So that is my two-pronged answer for procrastination. First, very tactical, set a timer for 25 minutes, focus on it, and get through that. Second, if it's something that's happening on a recurring basis, do a little journaling about why you might be procrastinating on it, and then see if you can't actually address some of the root causes through getting some support or whatever. I'm happy. I mean, if you want to practice with me, that's what the coaching sessions are for. So just schedule one. And as I said, I would say 75% of my time with my private coaching clients right now is all about preparing presentations and delivering presentations. And so I would be happy to help you through that if that's something that you would be interested in. Okay, next question. I am planning a strategic planning session. Do you have any tips to make it effective? Yeah, so if this is with your, I'm assuming this is sort of with your team, or maybe you're facilitating something. So typically with strategic planning, what you really need to think about is, what is your goal? What are your main outcomes for this session? For you personally, and then also talk to the stakeholders, talk to some of the participants or all of the participants if there's not too many of them, and just say, hey, we're going to have a strategic planning session. What would be, important things for you to consider, for us to be considering? What's an important topic that you think we can address? And as I think it's very fair also to tell them, we may not be able to cover everything because this planning session is, however long it is, but you wanted to get their input, and you will, you're going to do your best to address the major topics. So just make it clear. I think people really really like it when people solicit input from them. And sometimes people can get disappointed if you don't address what they told you. The higher you go in an organization, I think the more mature people understand, okay, we'll address it at a different time. But just you may want to just say that, hey, I'd love to get your input. Please recognize we won't be able to cover everything, but I'm trying my best to get feedback from the stakeholders. So that's the beginning, is doing some planning, getting stakeholder input, because then they will have more buy-in to participating in your session and more buy-in on the outcomes. So do that. Set an agenda. Time it as best you can with what you know. Larger blocks of time that include some discussion are typically better than like 15-minute slots all over the place. Those kinds of things almost never work. So it's better to pick like 3 main topics that you want to discuss and give time for that discussion, than to just try to fit in a bunch of things, right? Because one of the things that's important to understand is strategic planning means that it's about input and discussion, as opposed to a report out meeting where people are just giving updates. So if it's not clear to you, what the point is, then you need to make sure that you understand. Are you trying to get input from people and discussion? Or are you just trying to report out on different topics? So stakeholder input and agenda. I think it's really important to have what's called a parking lot, if you're not familiar with that in meetings. So it's simply just, if you're all together in the room, or actually if you're virtual, it's just a whiteboard where you say, okay, if somebody's bringing up a topic, it's not really on the agenda, then you just say, okay, hey, we're going to put that in the parking lot. And what that does is, 1, it allows you to get the agenda back on track and the conversation back on track. But 2, it also lets the person who is talking about it feel heard. If you actually write it down on the virtual or real whiteboard, then people are like, okay, I got my thought out. And that allows them to now think about something else. Because if you don't acknowledge that, they're going to just keep thinking about it. They'll either continue to try to derail the meeting, or they won't contribute as much as they could because they're stuck in their head over this thing. But you say, it's actually out there for everyone to see. So that's the other important thing about strategic planning. Run the meeting as best you can. If you could have someone else facilitate or someone else be a timekeeper other than you, I think that's always great. That allows you to really kind of help with the discussion flow, and also think about your own contributions, because it's tough to do that while you're keeping track of minutes and seconds. And then at the end, it's important really to summarize the key points, to summarize the actions that you took, to summarize the parking lot, and to be clear on what the next steps are. So are you going to provide minutes of the meeting? Are you going to schedule a follow-up, etc.? So just be clear on what the outcome is and what the next steps are. So those are really the kind of the key things at a high level for strategic planning sessions. Again, if you want more detail about, okay, well, what are the different topics that I should be discussing? I think that's probably better left to a one-on-one discussion, and we can think through, what those different topics could be. But yeah, getting stakeholder input in the planning phases is very important. An agenda with enough time for conversation and input, important. Parking lot to capture ideas that don't quite fit, important. And then, summarizing the meeting with follow-up and whatever kind of record keeping you plan to do and whatever the next steps are. So those are the key points to strategic, a good strategic planning session. Okay, this is the last question I have here. So do you make New Year's resolutions, or what is your New Year's resolution? So I do not make New Year's resolutions. I quit doing that years ago. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them. I just, I actually prefer to do something that I call a running start, which is where I really think through what I want to do like the next year, or things that I want to adapt. We've talked about the hot wash. So I do the hot wash on a frequent basis, where I'm looking at what worked well and what I need to take a look at. And then I try to actually come up with things and start implementing them in November. There's no sort of like scientific reason to do this. It's just that something that my former company used to do. We would always do a strategic planning session in November, and then have all of our travel planned and have all of our objectives planned for the first quarter before we went on holiday, so that when we came back in the new year, we could hit the ground running. And for me, I always, this is just a dumb thing, but I'm just gonna tell you. So for me, I always like to make sure that I go to the gym, like start a consistent habit at the gym if I don't already have one. And fortunately, I've had one for over a year now, but go to the gym in November, so that when all these like New Year's resolution people start showing up in January, like I've already got my workout sorted out, and then I just watch them start showing up, and then watch them all be gone by February. So I just sit there the whole month of January. I'm like, okay, I'll be glad when you guys leave, which I know is horrible, because of course you should want people to be able to sustain their fitness goals. But, it's just the reality of the situation. So I kind of come up with things that I've thought about throughout the year. I either implement them in real time, or I think about them kind of in the November timeframe and start implementing them in November, so that by the time January rolls around, like it's already a habit. So that's kind of my thing. So on that topic, I will just remind you, I'm going to share my screen here real quick. If you're thinking about wanting to do, let's see, hold on a second. If you're thinking about wanting to do something New Year's resolution-y and you're not sure what you want to focus on, I just want to remind you about the leadership blueprint that's in our resources library. And in particular, if you haven't had a chance to look at it, so the last section, section 3, is talks about looking at your whole life and many aspects of your whole life, and thinking about areas that you might want to address. And so what we have there, so absolutely you can say you want to lose weight, you can say you want to exercise, you can say you want to eat better. I mean, those are sort of the classic New Year's resolutions, at least in the US. I don't know what other parts of the world do. But I would invite you to take a look at page 19 of the leadership blueprint. And it has what I call my Life Quick Scan. And it's got categories about where you want to live, the relationships that you have, how your work is going, how your fitness is going, how your intellectual pursuits are going. It's a pretty comprehensive and quick and easy audit of your overall life. And I suggest you take a look at that and see if you can't come up with a maybe a little more interesting and maybe a little more impactful thing you want to work on in 2023. That may be you want to go to the gym 3 times a week, but it may also be that, maybe you want to spend more time with friends, or maybe you want to just find a way to laugh more. And so maybe you have a resolution that's a little bit different than the standard ones that, the news and everybody will be, telling us about. So I invite you to take a look at that. It's in, it's in the library, and there for you to explore. So if you haven't taken a look at that, then please take a look at that. Okay, so what is coming up? So I already mentioned it, but just want to remind you that you have coaching sessions as part of this program. And so you can go on the dashboard and click. It gives you my calendar link, any available slots that you have. And I really am here to either help you process any of the content that we've put in the membership, but also totally, real-time coaching on anything that's going on at work or in your life right now. I am a certified personal coach. And so while, this program is really focused on leadership development, I'm happy to help you with anything, because if something's blocking you from actually, implementing some of this stuff, then we need to clear it so that you can really focus on being the best, individual contributor, leader, and entrepreneur that you can be. And goal setting for 2023 is also really a great topic to discuss with through a coaching session. The second thing I want to tell you about, so I mentioned it a couple of sessions ago, I am going to be structuring the content a little bit more and giving you some kind of specific suggestions about the sequence of the content that you go through. So I'll be making this training in 3 phases. So phase 1 is what I'm calling personal leadership. Phase 2 is going to be team and organizational leadership. And phase 3 is transformational leadership. And so in personal leadership, what we're going to be focusing on is really defining your vision for yourself, both in your personal life and as a leader. We're going to do a module on personal productivity. This is really putting systems in place so you can get things done, and you can be extremely reliable on making sure that you're getting your tasks done, nothing's slipping through the cracks, etc. We are going to be doing Infinite Network, which is figuring out who are the right people to be supporting you, both in your career, whether it be learning new skills on the job or networking with decision makers who can help you get those prime projects. Also, maybe building your support network more on the social side of things, so that you really have this, this group of people that are really helping to support your growth. And then we're going to get clear on communicating your value proposition. We're going to do a very specific, really going to teach you my own personal methodology that I use for saying, okay, if I have 10 minutes, if I have 1 minute, I'm going to say this. If I have 10 minutes, I'm going to say this. If I have 30 minutes, I'm going to say this. I'm going to be able to quickly analyze my audience and adjust my communication style on the fly so that I can be impactful and clearly communicate my value proposition in any situation. So that's going to be the first phase, personal leadership. And we'll be working on that starting in January. So let's see. That really wraps up this session. So our next meeting will be January 18th, 2023. The same time, same station. So thank you all very much for your participation, and we will see you. We'll see you in the new year. Bye, everybody.